Good evening, barflies and lounge lizards, and welcome to the Atomic Snack Bar. And tonight we'll be discussing some of my favorite sci-fi toys from the 1960s. And what a time the 60s, in particular the early 60s, were for sci-fi themed toys. All thanks to the sci-fi craze of the 1950s. Now this list isn't really in any particular order, just a bunch of toys that I think are super cool and /or groovy fantastico. And first we have the Great Garloo from 1961 by Marx. And we're starting off with a bang here, for the Great Garloo is easily one of the most famous and well-loved sci-fi toys of the 1960s. Heck, the commercial even boasts,
"For every kid who has ever seen a science fiction movie."
And Garloo was a nearly 2-foot tall, green, scaly, remote-controlled monster who, as way more monsters should have, rocked a mighty fine-looking leopard print loincloth. He was kind of the rockabilly monster. Even his package featured leopard print. Or perhaps Tarzan had a baby with the lead gargoyle from the 1972 film Gargoyles. Didn't think I'd slip a Bernie Casey reference into a 1960s toy episode, did you? But Garloo actually had quite the range of movement. He could move forward and backward, turn, and even bend down to pick stuff up. He was a multi-talented monster, and he was designed by beloved film and television actor Forrest Tucker.
Sorry, Charlie. He was actually designed by Marvin Glass and Associates.
I'm pretty sure that's what I said. Good thing you can't rewind these videos or anything. But anyways, the Great Garloo was designed by famed toy designers Marvin Glass and Associates. This Chicago-based toy firm designed numerous classic toys, including the Light-Bright, Mousetrap, Simon, and the Evel Knievel Stunt Cycle. And the Great Garloo ran for around 17 or 18 bucks, a rather hefty cost for the time. Worth it. Next we have Mr. Machine from 1960 by Ideal. And talk about another classic toy. I even remember this guy from when I was a kid in the 80s. More on that in a moment. But Mr. Machine was a 17-inch tall, walking, sorta talking, steampunk-esque robot that you assembled yourself from 44 parts and an included plastic wrench. After turning the large key on his back, he would move forward, make noise, and his mouth would open and close. And who can forget the memorable Mr. Machine song?
Here he comes, greatest toy you've ever seen, and his name is Mr. Machine.
But what was really novel, besides his transparent body which allowed you to see his inner workings, was the fact that you could take him apart again. Mr. Machine was re-released in 1978. Only this version couldn't be disassembled, and rather than his weird noises, he played this old man. And much like our buddy Garloo, Mr. Machine was designed by the great Marvin Glass and Associates. This was actually the first big hit for the company, and Mr. Machine would actually go on to become Ideal's mascot. And he was designed by a former watchmaker named Leo Krepak. I never had a Mr. Machine myself, but I had a cousin who did, and this cousin was, let's just say, less than classy. And a bunch of large insects decided to call the inside of the robot home. So whenever he would start it up or drop it, a bunch of these nasty little critters would come scurrying out. And it was absolutely as disgusting as it sounds. Not really sure why I felt the need to share that story though. Filler content. And finally, Mr. Machine ran for about $12. And next on the list is Robot Commando from 1961, again by Ideal. And this is one of my favorite toys on the list. You know, robot nepotism and all that. But this charming and colorful bringer of destruction stood at 19 inches tall and could roll forward, turn, fire missiles from his arms and a rocket from his head, and his eyes rotated when in movement. But most unique of all was that he was remote controlled and voice activated using a mic in the remote control. One could say fire missiles and he would do so. Inside this hefty fellow there were 2 separate motors, one for movement and one for the missile and rocket firing. And he was powered with 3D batteries. It's really quite an ingenious piece of engineering, with the air pressure from spoken commands activating a metal contact that engaged the battery to power the motors. And once again, this guy was designed by Forrest Tucker of the Trollenberg Terror and the Ghostbusters fame.
Nope. That was Marvin Glass and Associates again.
I'm sure that's what I said this time. But once again, the Robot Commando was designed by the great Marvin Glass and Associates. I actually ran across one of these in the wild recently at a small record store in Fort Myers, Florida. And let me tell you, he was an impressive sight. Large and colorful and exceptionally tempting. But knowing what the price probably would have been, I didn't even dare to ask. Even in '61, he ran at $23, which according to the first inflation calendar I looked at, which I'm sure someone will disagree with, is about $236 in today money. And with that, let's take a break of some kind.
It was bedtime, all right, but there was Billy playing a new game protecting Earth from flying saucers. A flying saucer had landed, and out of it popped a saucer man. Show him your new Mattel Thunderbird gun, Billy. It fires with a real vibrating action in an entirely new way. No caps, no batteries. Pull the bolt, adjust the movable sight, and you're ready to fire again. That's not all, Saucer Man. Look at this new Mattel-O-Matic machine gun. Crank off a smoking burst or single shot. Too much for Mr. Saucer Man. Those guns are just out of this world. Okay, Billy, back into bed now. Yes, both of Billy's guns are those safe, sturdy Mattel toys. The bolt-action Thunderbird gun is $3, and the Mattel-O-Matic 30-caliber air-cooled machine gun is only $1.80. They're yours wherever toys are sold. You can tell it's Mattel. It's swell.
And we're back with King Zor from 1962 by Ideal. And this is a fantastic looking robot dinosaur, I guess, though I may be looking at him with robot tinted glasses. But this beautiful marvel of plastic engineering was marketed as the fighting dinosaur, and he was 31 inches long, 12 inches tall, and came with a dinosaur gun, 5 suction tip darts, and 5 plastic missiles. All of which played into his gimmick. Basically, he rolled around and you tried to shoot the disc on his tail with the suction darts. If you hit the target, King Zor would turn, let out a roar, and fire a missile of his own. Another neat feature was that if his tongue made contact with something, Zor would turn or even move backwards. You can't tell from the commercial, but Zor was a shade of blue.
I don't see any blue on this menu.
With green arms and legs. Yeah, I probably should have just put these in order because this fellow is quite the treasure. And he was designed by, you guessed it, Marvin Glass and Associates. I mean, really, Mr. Glass dominated the 1960s. And finally, King Zor ran at $20. Again, kind of a steep price. Some of these guys were just a bit too fancy for their own good. And next up we have the Astro Base from 1960 by, you guessed it, Ideal. And this is the first playset to make the list, and boy is it a doozy. Standing at over 18 inches tall, this piece of sci-fi come to life featured several unique play features, one of which was an astroscope, which was kind of like a viewfinder with a rotating image of rockets and spaceships that you could fire at. And by fire, I mean it would stop moving and it would make a sound. Then there was the Space Lock, a crane on the side of the unit that could raise or lower an astronaut figure, or whatever you chose for your raising and lowering needs. The primary purpose, though, was that of getting the spaceman out of his scout car. And said scout car could be plugged into the base itself and controlled, and it fired missiles, much like every car in the 1960s. There were 2 different versions of the Astro Base. The first was all red and the astroscope lit up. It was eventually replaced with a red and white version without illumination. I saw this one at that very same record store that had the Robot Commando, and it was equally as impressive. The Astro Base ran at the price of $19.95. And now it's time for an honorable mention, and that's the Lost in Space Switch and Go playset by Mattel. And this is actually my favorite toy of the 1960s, but I could barely find any info on it, and there doesn't appear to have been a commercial. But this thing was just amazing. It came with the Chariot, the Jupiter 2, plastic figures of the crew, and backdrops. It even had a flexible track and an air pump to control the Chariot. I would have loved this one as a kid. Heck, I'd love this one now. And the final entry on this list is Rock'em Sock'em Robots from 1964. Though some sources say 66, I think it was 64. By Marx. And these are easily the most famous and iconic of all the sci-fi toys of the time. The concept is simple. 2 opposing robots, one in red, one in blue, in a boxing ring, and the players make them fight. The first to knock the other player's head up is the winner. And this game is supposedly the source of the phrase, knock his block off. These 2 battling bots were named Red Rocker and Blue Bomber. Though in the UK they were renamed Basher Bonker and Biffer Bonker, but the UK renaming the characters was a rare occurrence that never happened again.
Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
No, I kid. They certainly weren't alone in that.
I've been painfully aware of that.
But Rock'em Sock'em Robots were designed by I'm sure you will be exceptionally surprised to hear Marvin Glass and Associates. So what is that now? 5 out of the 7 toys I talked about today? That Marvin Glass deserves some kind of classic sci-fi award. Somebody get on that, because I know that about 78% of my viewers are actually very important people. The other 22% are actually 3 cats wearing a trench coat. Rock'em Sock'em Robots ran for somewhere between $8 and $10. In 1977, they were redesigned to look a bit spacier to cash in on an obscure sci-fi film called Star Something or Another. Probably Star Crash, I would guess. And I would like to give a special thanks to toytales.ca, where a good bit of today's information came from, and to Thrash Pondo Pons for dropping by to talk some nonsense. And that's all the time we have for this week. Please like, comment, subscribe, watch the skies, and stay atomic.